Welcome again to our Top Voices podcast. And we're very lucky with the people that we get to meet when we're having these conversations. So I'm going to start quickly and do the introductions of who we're talking with today. So first, we're going to introduce Emma. Emma Keane is currently the head of localization at Balsam Brands, and she's going to have the opportunity to tell us all about Balsam and her role and whatever she can share about that. And Emma has 25 years in the tech and language management space. I know, it goes by too fast. I won't tell you how many years. Well, I will tell you, I have 40 years business experience. Bruno, obviously we know Bruno well. He's one of the leading voices in the language management industry. And Bruno works with organisations of all sizes to help them expand digitally and help them engage globally and at scale. I'm Paula McGrath. I own and run International Achievers Group, and we're a solutions recruitment partner that work pretty much on a customer first basis, both with candidates and clients. So we're going to get started, Emma. And I overheard a very interesting, when I was outside getting the coffee, you asked Bruno a question about, so Bruno, tell me, how did I end up here? Are you happy to share that with us?
Well, I mean, Bruno can answer the question. I suppose it's just because the localization industry, if you've been in it as long as we have, is quite small and everybody sort of knows each other. So I was just wondering, who do I need to have words with that got me into this situation? I'm only joking. I was just curious to know what the connections are. So that's all good.
But it's useful for me to overhear those questions because truthfully, sometimes I make assumptions. Not sometimes, a lot of the time, I probably make assumptions around people that know each other and the understanding, and that are we communicating our message clearly enough? So, Bruno, do you want to share?
No, exactly. Well, of course, when I was thinking about some new guests for the podcast, I was thinking first about, getting people physically here in the studio. So people living in Dublin or around Dublin or even in Ireland. And so I can remember all the events when I was attending, where I was presenting, and I said, okay, I still know a bit, some people, not everyone, because I'm 31 years in this community, so some people already left the industry. I'm still alive, and
it's a bit dramatic.
Alive professionally. Yeah, that's what I mean. Physically too, but professionally. And I said, okay, I remember having seen Emma and having met Emma in the audience or on stage. So I said, well, why not ask Emma? And Emma was kind enough to say,
it's my pleasure to be here this morning.
That's great. So I suppose if we very quickly have a quick review as to why we started this podcast, it might be useful. I remember Bruno and I sitting, honestly, with our marketing people that look after us very well, thankfully, and we were trying to find a way and it's in the last sort of 18 months, and sort of the industry seemed to be in quite a slump, particularly in Europe. And Bruno has a lot of contacts, a lot of knowledge in the industry, and we decided to find a way for, honestly, the people that were happy to do so, top voices from the industry, to come and maybe share their experience from the business perspective, from the suppliers, their engagement with the suppliers' perspective, from candidates that might like to work at their companies, to how, the career opportunities. So it was a way that we thought individuals could share useful information and be helpful to each other. So you also asked me a question about how, what is the relationship in this Top Voices podcast? Well, as I said earlier, I own and run International Achievers Group. So we're a recruiting agency and we work in a particular style. And then we're very, very fortunate to have Bruno on board with us. So Bruno works as a strategic advisor with me. Now, that's the very least of what Bruno does. He does an awful lot more than that, thankfully. And we run Top Voices podcast, truthfully, out of International Achievers Group. So that is it. Have I missed anything?
No, I think you are spot on. I think, Emma, you are a top voice because of your experience, because of your expertise. So it's always a combination of, people who have done many things, and who have been also, working in some industries. And I'm sure you're going to talk a lot about your industry, because that's very interesting, even for me, who is not a specialist. So all the top voices share this blend of expertise, experience, and an engagement as well. So you're not unknown in the localization industry. People saw you in Lock World and probably in many other events. So when people will see you, they will say, "Oh yeah, it's Emma." So it's easier for us to say, we don't need to put your name in in big letters. So you are known. So it's even easier for us.
Yeah. So let's give you a chance to speak.
Yeah, sure.
So why don't we start maybe with your career trajectory, like maybe your educational background. How did you end up in this industry? How did you end up where you are now?
Yeah, that's a long story. I'll try to keep it to the highlights, right? So basically, I think common with loads of people in localization, I just love languages.
Yeah.
I love language, linguistics. How do languages work? The nuts and bolts of language, really. That's totally my passion.
Where did that come from? Do you think?
I'm from West Cork, and it's a very multicultural, to be honest, kind of place. So I grew up hearing lots of European languages from lots of French and German and Italians, even back then in the 70s and 80s, And I was just always fascinated by languages. And I suppose the key, the pivotal moment for me was one time camping with my family in France.
Oh.
We were on a campsite, and I had done a couple of years of German at this stage, and I heard this language, and I was like, pre-internet now, you got to remember.
Yeah.
And I heard this language, I was like, I can understand that almost, but not quite. What is that? And it turned out to be Dutch. And that's what immediately piqued my interest.
The tiniest of moments can change.
Yes. And then I went on from there to study Germanic languages in Trinity, which is German, Dutch, Swedish, and historical linguistics, and what was the fifth element? Like social linguistics, basically.
Okay.
Very light on literature, very heavy on language and how language works. So basically started from there. And I just love languages. What can I say? So that was my career trajectory, I suppose, in terms of education. As part of that, I spent time living in the Netherlands, in Germany, and in Sweden as well. On my Erasmus year, I randomly learned to speak Spanish because I knew lots of Spanish people, just as you do. I also studied a little bit of Finnish, again, just because I like languages.
Do you speak Irish?
Yes, my kids go to a Gael school, actually. So,
okay, so
but at this stage in my life, it's almost like a one in, one out.
Okay.
If one language gets strong, the others get a bit weaker.
I meet very few people Irish speakers, and
there's lots in Dublin 8.
Well,
lots. And you hear it a lot in the playgrounds and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So that's languages. Then after university, I came out. Didn't know anything about localization. It was a very kind of academic focused course, but it was an arts education in the truest sense of the word.
Yeah.
And I'll come back to that after. But basically, I was snapped up to work in customer support because obviously I'm a very flexible resource. You can put me on a gazillion different lines. So I was speaking to customers from Germany, the Netherlands, some Scandinavian, Austria, Switzerland, but they were difficult. Schweizerdeutsch is always very hard.
Very different language.
Yes, exactly. So that's kind of where I started. I was working on the lines for about a year, and then management kind of saw me and gave me an opportunity to move into at that time, it was the European Product Development Department, which had a localization function there. Okay. And so I really kind of learned on the job. The company was Creative Labs. They produced a lot of computer games like DVD players, sound cards for computers, really cool like home Dolby surround systems. So we were localizing, the packaging, the software that would run these tools, printed manuals at the time, online help, all that sort of stuff. So that was that. So I stayed there for a good few years, and then after that I moved on I did a brief stint on the sort of LSP side, and then I got an opportunity to move to me much more interesting kind of role linguistically in Symantec, as it was back in the day, working with Fred Hollywood and a bunch of those people. That was insanely intellectually stimulating, super interesting. I mean, this was like the foundation of LLMs that everybody's tripping off their tongue today. This is back in like, I'd have to check the dates, but it's like the 2006, something like that. So way early days, you know. So I'm always trying to tell people, us in localization, we're not in awe of AI because we basically built it, you know. Our technology underpins so much of it, and we really know how it works. Then from Symantec, I did many different roles there. Everything from, you know, started off kind of managing some software and help localization projects up to managing linguistic QA projects, then working together with teams of linguists to like sort of feed terminology into the rules-based Sistran translation system. This would be predating like Neural MT that we have now. Did a lot of work in terminology and so on. And then from there, I got the role in Balsam Brands, where I am today. And just I want to come back to full circle to like a very kind of academic type of education versus a very, I know you can do like localization as an education in some universities, for example, but I didn't do anything like that. However, I would kind of put it to the world that my studying sort of ancient and old linguistics, like we did Old Norse, Proto-Germanic, you know, we were reading runes, all this kind of stuff. Learning how to read that actually stood to me in my new role, right? Because I needed to work on search engine optimization, which is actually all about linguistics and the person's intent in their mind and how do they put that into the words that they will then search for. It's not necessarily the same thing as you will find, you know, it's not like a table. They might search for something else, like a place to put something or whatever. So it's all about the psycholinguistics that underpin how language works. So I just found that so fascinating that I was able to apply something so kind of abstract. Like I was reading about you know, Old Norse spells how to fix your horse's broken leg, because back in the day, your horse was life. It was everything you had, right? We're talking 1,000 years ago.
That's right.
And this was super important. And it was learning how to kind of decipher those sort of strangely worded things into what do they mean? What did the person who wrote this 1,000 years ago, what was their intention here? I got to use that working on search engine optimization at a very kind of ethereal sort of level, but you kind of know what I mean.
I do, yeah. That's fantastic, isn't
it? It's very interesting. So I just love all that, basically.
Hopefully this might offer some comfort to parents of youngsters heading off to college who appear to be studying courses that seem, you know, ethereal or...
Can you imagine my parents back in West Cork, back in the day, their daughter wanted to study German, Dutch and Swedish. Like, what? You can't even teach those in secondary school here. German, okay, but Dutch and Swedish? What?
Cork has been very cosmopolitan for a long time.
Yes.
So maybe, you know, hopefully your parents, you know, could
well, obviously
see.
I did it.
Yeah,
so,
you got away with it.
It worked out fine.
It did.
It's quite impressive. I mean, I'm really surprised because, as you said, you know, German is a major language. For me, Dutch is natural because I'm living in Belgium, so Dutch is spoken in Belgium and the Netherlands mostly.
Vlaams.
Yeah, Vlaams.
Yeah, love it.
And but I know that when I say, you know, I'm speaking Dutch as well, people say, oh yeah, this small language, you know, in the north of Europe. But of course, you know, people are used to German, they're used to French, Spanish, because these are very international languages due to the number of people speaking the language. But it's very interesting that you move to Dutch, Swedish, all these so-called small languages. I don't like the term, but
I know
they call it, you know, small, just for the number of people who can speak that language.
Yes, but you see, the course that I did was all about how languages develop and developed from each other. As an example, when I was on my, and this kind of blew my mind at the time, when I was on my Erasmus year in Groningen, I was doing Old Norse. The class was in Dutch because I was in the Netherlands. Our textbook was in Norwegian. So it's like, there you go, you know. But like, we managed
how many people were in your class?
In Trinity?
No, when you were on your Erasmus year.
I'm
just thinking of the people
I was just in with
actually...
all the Dutch people, you know.
Okay, and they can obviously automatically
But I had
read.
done 1 year of 2 years of Dutch at this stage, but it was a very intensive course, and because we learned how the languages are all interrelated and how they grew and developed from each other, you learn it very quickly. So that was actually completely fine, but it is a bit crazy if you think about it. It's like, whoa, you know.
Yeah, it's wow.
So, but that's because it's all about kind of the principles and how languages work, which is what I love and what I'm interested in, versus like literature so much, you know.
And how it has helped humanity to continue to grow. I can remember when I was in secondary school, I did French and German, obviously Irish.
Oh, I did French as well.
Yeah, that's probably pretty much that probably still is the norm, is it, in secondary
standard,
school?
I think, yeah.
But I can remember through the German teacher, we were lucky to have a very strong German teacher. I was actually better at my other languages, including English, because she went back to the Latin route.
Oh, yes. Same. The German teachers always do that. Mine did
do
exactly
I remember
the same.
it all? No. Now, if you started to talk in German, I'd probably get, still probably get, as long as you weren't doing business terminology, but I'd probably get a bit of it.
Yeah.
But it was fascinating. I'd forgotten it until I'm listening to you speak. I'm thinking, the German teacher going back to Latin route. I mean, through that, my English improved.
Yeah. Well, there is some sort of foundation of languages that is really interesting.
There absolutely
and
is,
that's why, for instance, you have so many people in the Netherlands and also in the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium speaking German, because it's very easier. It's very easy, much easier for French-speaking people.
But they make very funny mistakes with the false friends and stuff, you know. It's always entertaining.
But that's the same between Italian and French people, for instance. You know,
the
same roots, but you know, sometimes you believe the words are the same with just a flavor of Italian or a flavor of French, and just realize that those words have nothing in common.
Yes.
So it's but you're right.
Very
I think the best
so.
way to learn a language or to use a language is to look at the roots. It's to look at the logic. I think, you know, human beings, that's back to my days at university. One of my professor of linguistics was always telling us that to understand and to practice a language, it was really useful, even I would say essential, to consider that most languages in Europe were actually created based on the logic. That humans decided to have rules, like, you know, there are spelling rules, grammar rules, and of course each rule has exceptions. That's not the point. But that, you know, most languages have been sort of part of a process called modelization.
Yes.
And that's, I believe in that. I believe in that, and that's why, indeed, you have some, you know, words that are nearly the same, but of course very different in meaning. And then on the other hand, some words that sound very different, and they are the same. And actually, the logic is certainly, you know, I love the way you said it for German. You know, that you had to sort of, you know, look at the logic and, you know, what is the model of that was used at the foundation of German, and then based on that, you can use it as a springboard to Dutch, to Swedish. And Norwegian, etc. So it's a very interesting approach. So I think if there were more people like you, there would be also more people who were bilingual, or multilingual. But so a Dutch lady in Ireland, that's Dutch-speaking person in Ireland, and
Swedish.
So I guess you had no problem to find a job with that.
Well, I mean, but I think it's probably the auxiliary skills that I've built up over the years, you know, that really...
Well, the auxiliary skills are the ones that permit you to be promoted and developed, because, yes, there's a serious shortage in this country of people with that language combination. There is a serious... But, you know, it's the icing on top of that you need if you want to start moving up through an organisation.
I mean, I use my languages a bit now, but it's definitely more... sort of process or like framework type, strategic type efforts, but at the same time, understanding how they work really is a valuable skill to have.
I think that we all underestimate the value of our foundations, because it's like, you know, all of us, we all have a particular, you know, professional background, educational background, and without them I couldn't do what I can do today, but I don't technically use most of it. But
it's probably there in the background as a framework for...
I think it's important not to underestimate the foundations, because sometimes, you know, people can look and think, oh, I could do that. Yeah, do you know something? You might be able to do that, but you'd run out of steam after 20 minutes without the foundation.
Very true.
How many languages are spoken in your home?
In my
At home now?
At home,
your family unit?
Just two. They're very monolingual, unfortunately, much to my ire.
I was expecting a long list. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
My husband is Scottish.
Okay.
So just English. He knows some German. They unfortunately don't learn Scots Gaelic in school.
They don't?
No, although my children can understand it, right? So at home with the kids, I speak English and a mix of Irish, and I think my husband is slowly picking up some of the Gaelic along with that.
So, tell us about your current employer, and first of all, who they are, what they do, where they're based.
Yeah, so I work for a company called Balsam Brands.
Yep.
So it's an umbrella sort of, have a bunch of different brands. The primary one in Europe is Balsam Hills. So in the US, we have a broader range of products, but here in Europe, it's primarily Christmas decor and Christmas trees. Actual physical Christmas trees, just to be clear on this. It's not an AI thing or anything, or some weird computer language. It's actually Christmas trees.
Okay.
Right? Artificial Christmas trees. They're absolutely gorgeous, beautiful, beautiful products. So it's an American company. It's privately held. It's actually super special company, I will say. And I would urge folks to kind of look up the Tugboat Institute and Evergreen companies. So they are very special companies that are privately held. And there's like the 5 Ps of what is an evergreen company. It's basically about being privately held, being profitable, people first, persevering and having a very long-term goal that sort of publicly or stock market or shareholder type companies, they can't quite take the same sort of long-term view that we can.
It's about sustaining.
Yes. So the company has about doubled or tripled in size since I joined.
Sorry, what is Evergreen? Is Evergreen the holding company?
No, Evergreen, not at all. Evergreen is maybe something like yourself. It's sort of like a mentoring umbrella where CEOs of privately held companies that have this particular mindset, set of values, right? Can get together and share ideas. The whole point of it is to be...
It's like a movement.
It is. It is a movement, but it's really special because it's
write that down.
it's not all about, of course, we need to be profitable. If we're not profitable, we won't have a business. But it's not profit at all costs. And it's absolutely... I really believe in this as a concept, and I feel really good about working here because of, that aspect. We're not like... just for shareholders or quarterly profits. Some
sort of values-driven...
Oh, absolutely.
Group of people, actually,
Yes.
Okay,
exactly.
Interesting.
So that's kind of... Yeah, exactly. That's the kind of the ethos, right, of the company. Whoa. Our own company, Balsam Brands, our ethos basically is to spread joy, pretty much. That's our key value, because... if you think about Christmas trees, they're like a focal point of many people's celebrations. Whatever else is happening in the world, you can come home to your family and have a lovely Christmas. And our trees and other decor items are an integral part of that. So that's kind of who the company is. We're pretty small, right? We are small, but we're a luxury product. And so I've built a really, world-class, I like to think, lock function to support our business. From Dublin, we support UK, Australia, Canada, and then, of course, France, Germany. We're opening up to the Netherlands this year, Austria, and so on, right? So we have French and German websites, and then localized versions for the different English-speaking countries as well.
Okay.
So that's kind of who we are and what we do.
Yeah, would you say that your company belongs to the retail industry?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
very
retail.
much so. Yeah, high-end.
E-commerce or...
We are an e-commerce company, but we are direct-to-consumer.
Okay. Yeah. So do you have physical buildings, physical shops?
We have a couple in the US.
Okay.
We have an outlet store, which I'd highly recommend folks to visit if you're ever in California in the Bay Area.
Oh, in the Bay Area.
We have a couple of shops in Hawaii as well. And then aside from that, we pretty much just online, actually.
Okay.
But we do various activations at certain points in the year with partner PR companies where, people like Winter Wonderland, I think in London last year we sponsored, and you see our trees like everywhere.
So how many languages are you in? How many languages do you do?
Well, all the variations of English that I mentioned, and French and German.
Okay.
And we're adding on Italian and Spanish this year.
Okay.
But the English localization is also very important there, actually, because it's a very high-end brand.
Yeah. The subtleties matter.
Absolutely, they really do. But what I love about my role is that I get to do so many different aspects, so many different types of things I'm involved in, and I can talk a bit more about them after. But it's just fascinating. I get to work on so many different types of content, and ultimately, one of the key things that is my true north that drives me is the customer experience. I have to say, I'm always thinking about the customer first, and for me, like, my pet customers are the ones in non-English speaking countries, because they always kind of sort of feel like they get the least love, maybe. And I'm sort of like the advocate, right, for an amazing customer experience in as much as I can control in my little part of the balsam world to provide them with a great experience, be that from finding us through the SEO work or having a good experience on the website where they get the product in-house, it's all printed, there's materials in the box that are correctly localized, through to customer support, etc., etc.
You really are engaged at every step of the journey.
Absolutely.
You need to be if it's a smaller company. When you say small, how many people is that work in the total company?
I think we have about 280, maybe 300, something like that.
Okay.
And then how many people are dedicated to the language side of the business? The language management, the localization?
2 of us now. It was just me for a long time. But since 3 or 4 years now, I have one other person working with me, which is great.
Oh, yeah. My goodness, you must have been busy.
Yeah, it was. But I have to say, we're able to do more like strategic and more interesting initiatives when I'm not having to firefight all the production stuff, as well as trying to work on more strategic things.
No, it's very interesting, but also I was assuming that your North Star would be language experience.
But yes,
it is, because that's what I hear from other people I know who are deep into what I call marketing localization. They say that obviously one of the traits of this sort of localization is that you care for language experience more than language effectiveness in the IT industry, for instance, where you have a lot of
we're very interesting.
We're
a very interesting mix, though, right? Because we are solely online. So the language impact also really matters.
Yep.
How you call the call to action buttons, that really matters. Do people click on it or not? Do they complete the purchase or not? Ultimately, that's the basis of the bottom line. You know?
I agree.
Is your SEO working? How much are you having to pay to get people to your site if that's not working, you know?
I think
so. It's a great mix of
both.
agree.
I totally agree. And for me personally, because I know there are many discussions around those different concepts. But for me personally, I think the mother of all localization flavors is actually language experience, because from language experience you can sort of look at one branch which is called training, marketing. And for me, localized content has a job to do. Localized content can be used to train. It can be used to inform. It can be used to sell. So every time you localize, you think that your content has a job to do.
I agree. However, you do need to sell it internally.
And
people who are not in localization, they don't care about this stuff.
No,
that's the
tell me about it.
Same, right? That is the challenge.
Because I think if the commercial impact is not taken into account, I think language is nothing more than a luxury.
Yep.
Not really. If people don't understand you, they won't buy from you.
That's what I meant. Sorry, that's what I was trying to say.
Oh,
you expressed it better than I did. That if it doesn't work, it won't stay in the company. I come from a background where obviously I was going to be worked in firms of accountants for about 100 years. I'm going to be a partner. So for me,
I understand where you're going. Yeah,
I'm inclined to see things from the other way.
Absolutely, but me too. Yes.
Yeah, I know that, and that's why that I think if you're lucky, you'll get people that work with you that have the combination of your skills and are able to understand the commercial imperative.
Yeah, but not all of them will, though, and that's the challenge.
Of course not. So I think as well, trying to identify who our real stakeholders are. The number one stakeholder is the person sitting beside you in your desk, or your company, or the person that signs off the checks, or the
totally. Yes.
So,
but that's why this internal kind of internal PR, internal marketing piece is so important.
Yeah,
it's just critical. So as an example, in terms of like, what kind of metrics do I manage, right? So I manage, of course, I'm really interested in all the language localization specific metrics, but I've had to resign myself to the fact that I'm the only person they matter to, basically. And
well, hopefully your new team
Tara,
member
who works with me, yes, for sure, and our vendor partners, right?
Yeah.
But to the others, no, they're interested in, conversion rates, time on page, bounce rate, SEO rankings, how well does our TV spot engage, all of these different things.
That's it.
So that's why I'm now, I'm in the process of trying to figure out how should I rebrand my organisation, my team, my department, right?
Yeah.
Because we are localization, but that way undersells what we do. And I think the other thing is that like localization can easily be commoditized, like you were saying.
Yeah.
Oh, we can just outsource that, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm constantly emphasizing to my team is that we do so much more than that.
Yeah.
And here's where the value add is of what we're doing. We're not just pushing files around. We're doing so much more. As an example, I do a lot of work on internationalization with our developer teams, right? And then that's way at the design conceptual stage of a new feature. The feature itself might be fine, but then how do the software developers develop it? How do they implement it? That sort of stuff. How are our systems? How's our content management system set up? Is that scalable for localizing into 2 more languages? No, it's not. But then I need to quantify that and be able to give folks outside of localization, numbers, hours, dollar values to sort of make the case there.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important that it doesn't become identified as a cost centre.
Exactly.
Yes,
this is one of my favourite.
Which is why I'm talking about customer service.
Yeah.
However, I will say, if you I've just worked on this amazing project over the last sort of year and a half, which has so elevated the profile of localization, which I hate using that word now. Actually, I'm still struggling to find the right one.
But we can associate it with what you're saying.
Yeah, but basically, we worked together with our customer support team to implement, and I don't want to name the name of the company.
Oh no, that's fine.
To implement a machine translation system to enable our customer support team in the Philippines, who are directly employed by Balsam, to support customers in France and Germany, basically in French and German, right? And that was, there's many different companies that offer this as a solution to customers. A lot of them will go on the sort of customer support conference circuit. Very expensive. We're small. Those solutions are really expensive.
Oh, yeah.
I came up with a much cheaper solution because we have me. We know, I know how MT engines work. I know how the content should be written to enable machine translation. I know how we should train the agents culturally to be culturally more sensitive in how they write. And I trained the engine, I trained the agents. We had an ongoing sort of quality eval process internally, which was really focused on the linguistic aspects of implementing that. And it's been a roaring success.
Yeah.
Can I just clarify? So what you were saying there is that you were sort of comparing outsourcing the customer service to in-housing it. Is that what you were saying?
No.
What did I miss there? What was the...
Because we, instead of... we are obviously Christmas tree company, right?
Yeah.
So we're very... Our customer support demands are very seasonal.
Yeah.
They peak. So we can't hire French and German speakers all year round.
Of course, yeah.
Right? And so then when it came to season, it gets so busy. We struggled to hire enough of them. And they are very expensive resources and they're super in demand.
I get it. Yeah,
so that was the challenge.
Okay.
So it was more like a volume. How can we scale this up? And we had an amazing team in the Philippines already, but they couldn't speak French or German, right?
Yeah.
And I found a way to bridge that gap using my team and all the language assets we'd built up, all of the linguistic knowledge I built up in my career, working with the customer support team, the customer support agents, this machine translation partner, to implement a program to sort of solve that problem.
There has to be
for
an
like
element.
half the price of what the other solutions would have been.
Well done. So
You
there has
know?
to be an element of automation in that then.
Of course. Yeah,
okay,
there is.
yeah.
But
So I'm just
you
trying to picture how would you do that.
Yeah.
And I'm not a technician, but to picture the...
But it's all about, it's kind of back to the AI thing as well. You can't just throw AI into something and it'll work. You need to mindfully train it and correctly...
You need to operationalize it.
Yes, exactly. You know.
Well, this is Bruno's area of expertise.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well,
Well, I'm no
off he
expert,
goes.
but I just a little teeny tiny project.
But I think you brought up a very important point, a very important word, which is value, because actually, I'm working now with two clients, very different, and I'm doing actually what I was doing when I was an employee in different companies, and actually to demonstrate and measure the value of language management.
Yeah.
And
Or the cost of not managing it.
the
perhaps.
cost of not doing it. Exactly, absolutely. The cost of doing the right thing, the wrong thing, and nothing.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
really the best contrast you can use.
Yeah.
But I think that for both companies that I'm working with, there are two things in common for in terms of strategic approach, which is that the first one is to, that's my own terminology, to actually elevate, integrate, and celebrate localization in something bigger, which is called content supply chain, from creation to delivery.
Yes.
And then the second thing, once this is done, for the label, because you mentioned, of course, that you want to change the label,
Language
I can give you
operations
two
or
options
yeah.
that I'm using with those two customers.
I'd love to hear them.
It's there is no copyright, so it's a gift for me. The first one is going to be renamed International Customer Experience Team.
Yes, I like that one.
And the other one is going to be called Global Content Operations Team.
Oh, interesting.
So very different. One is like in life science. One is in market research. And actually, but the goal is the same.
Yeah.
Labels are very different labels, but the point is always to make sure that people understand that localization cannot be standalone.
Yes,
it has
that's
to be,
exactly it.
That is something
exactly
which is sometimes people, as Paula knows, some people criticize me for the sort of pushing this view, which is that localization should be integrated into something bigger,
Absolutely.
which is
Totally
global
agree.
product management, global content management, because
it should be everyone's job, not
exactly
just the not function's job, right? Yeah.
And for people who are just like you, who are responsible leading localization for the moment, it's the best place to sit. Because at the end of the day, if you are embedded, integrated into supply chains, whether it's product or content, you can work more easily and more closely with other functions like design, development, UX, testing teams, and you are recognized by those people who tell, we need to work with Emma because Emma has this expertise, which is the language expertise, and the language expertise, in my view, doesn't start in localization. It starts with content creation. So it is
absolutely.
It is. So what you said resonates so much with me, because there are so many. Well, not just me, but I hear that from other people. Oh, you know what? We struggle with the name of our team, or we struggle with the positioning because the positioning is just too narrow. Or
That's it.
It is floating around. So essentially, localization teams on the client side are sometimes frustrated because they say we are not recognized, we're not celebrated, and we do so much.
Everyone has this,
we speak to a lot of people.
It is. For my recipe, which is of course. There is no magic, but it's really to first strategically, as I said, elevate, integrate, and celebrate. But it has to be in the right place. I told so many localization managers, if you and your team want to be recognized, let's put it like that, and the value that you create is visible for the rest of the business, don't stay in your corner. Just get out and integrate yourself into global content. And to be honest, Paula knows it, I use often the example of UX team. UX teams have been so great at integrating themselves
into everything.
So why localization managers couldn't do it? It's just so value is really what matters for everyone,
of course,
for you and for the clients. But I think that there is this sort of sometimes I feel the localization industry, most on the supplier side, very conservative. That they say that localization is everything. I use this analogy with a puzzle. So, a number of suppliers I worked with were telling me that localization was their world. And I said, for me, localization is a puzzle, is a piece of my puzzle, which is my world was product management. My world was content management. And I was saying, I'm happy to work with you as a partner, not as a vendor. If you are able to support me in delivering localized content, that is your world. Of course, you just see localization as your full puzzle. But for me, your full puzzle is a piece of my puzzle.
I think the best analogy I've heard you use around that is around the tea bag.
Oh, the tea bag, exactly. Infusing localization across the supply chains, where language expertise is needed. And even for AI today.
But I sort of feel that localization is a bit reductive as a term, especially considering the work that I and my team do, the different areas that we contribute to.
In my latest when I was in my latest job as an employee, I labeled my team language experts. Because it was more than localization managers. Because I always told people in my company, but also to clients, that language expertise, just like AI today, language expertise doesn't start when there is an output to post-edit or to enrich.
It starts at the conception point.
It starts at language data. You need the right language data. You need the right prompt. And for that, you need language expertise.
That's very true, actually.
So can I ask you a question? I don't want to cause any offence to anybody, but whose responsibility is it then to make sure the message is communicated about the overall advantage of a team within an organisation?
The head of the team.
Yep.
It's my responsibility.
Oh, no. Okay, you answer that very freely, but it's more about not everybody has those skills and not everybody has those. So this question, might not ever get into the podcast, but not everybody. It's like when I worked in the firms of accountants. Oh my God, I worked with some brilliant people, but try to get them to able to communicate their value.
Yeah, but that's the same everywhere.
I know.
That's the paradox.
Especially working in a
American company. But then is it not the employer's then responsibility to ensure that brilliant people that you're trying to hold on to are properly trained and are properly...
But you can't, I don't know, can you train all those things? Sometimes it's a bit of a sense.
No, I do get that. And I also know as the owner of a business, now a small business, that I don't always have the time in the space in my head to be thinking, oh my God, I hope that brilliant employee is actually being developed enough personally to be able to represent, because I have so many other conflicting things going on in my head.
Well, actually, in my company though, because we're kind of quite small, we are also expanding a lot very quickly. It's not quite a startup, but it's just a bit bigger than that, right? So we are constantly having to grow and flex and change how we are working and what our responsibilities are. So like the person who's working with me, like I'm always encouraging her to, sort of try to elevate her thinking and think a bit more, right, today I only have to do this for 3 languages. What next year when I have to do it for 6? We're not going to get another person. How can I change how I'm working? How can I operationalize and perhaps outsource some of these tasks that I'm doing today in a more like scalable manner? So we're constantly evolving and constantly changing. Exactly. And I think like everyone, we're all doing more with the same or maybe less, right? But it's all about like growing. But also for me though, it's still always all about keeping my customer front of mind and ensuring that they have a great experience. Because, we are an elevated brand. The products are expensive. And so the customers have a certain expectation, and that's like really important.
Yeah. And to circle back on what you said, Paula, which is who is going to lead the charge, so to speak.
Yes. Yeah.
I think you're right. In any organization, there will be some skepticism or some reluctance from people. But I think there is another factor, which is, I'm going to be very cautious, some old culture in the localization industry, which is to say that, localization has to be so strong that it has to be really operating a little bit alone, and it has to be respected by other functions as if localization was the queen of the business. And I remember, for instance, my latest presentation at Lock World, I received some rotten tomatoes from people because they said that they said that, Bruno, you are diluting localization into your operations. And I said, no, I'm not diluting localization.
Yeah.
I'm actually elevating and integrating localization to gain value in the supply chain, because I know that it in my team was not in the global content operations, that my team was going to be set apart, and that this team was going to be called only, oh, can you translate these files in German? Or you know what I mean? So very transactional, and there is no real engagement.
Yes.
And that's why I said, I disagree with those people who threw me, rotten tomatoes, because I said my message in this presentation in Berlin was just to say, I'm telling you what I'm doing, and it's not diluting localization. It is repositioning, and repositioning means elevating and integrating.
I think differing viewpoints are always good to get, and they get you to really examine your own argument and your own position.
Absolutely.
And there's always things to be learned from even your most painful critics. I think,
Absolutely.
I know, but not everybody has the confidence to accept the discussion or to accept. And it does take a lot of confidence.
No, I do think as well, though, Bruno, it probably depends what your business is,
Absolutely.
So for us, our business is not language. Our business is not localization. Right? It's a whole other business. And so it's about me finding the right way to support the business of Christmas trees, basically, to support that.
I totally agree. And that's why I never said that I was part of the localization industry. I said that I was part of the localization community.
Oh, yes, I get
the
you.
industry is suppliers.
Yes.
And most of my career has been on the client side. And I said I belong to a community, but my industry is life science or IT when I was working for an IT company. This is my business. So I'm responsible for localization, but within an industry which is called life science. And of course, for a supplier like RWS and a few other ones, I understand they consider themselves as the industry, because indeed these are the suppliers. They are.
That's true.
But it's your and I totally agree about the fact that it depends on your company, your not just your the size of your company, but the industry.
Yes.
Because in regulated industries, there are things that are giving you a headache every day.
Yes.
That was my previous life. But also, it's really. But your challenge is probably that you are just two people. In a company, you say that it's a fairly small company, but two people is really small team.
Yeah, and we do everything, right? We do what's on the box, what's in the box, what's on the website, the marketing, the SEO, what's behind the website, customer service, everything. TV spots, everything, everything from all the way across all our different customer touch points. Anything that's localized, legal, comes through me and my team. And lots of those teams internally work in their own little silos. We're one of the few teams that sort of sees everybody's laundry drawer, so to speak, and trying to keep all of these things consistent across all of those different touch points and all of those different systems and content management systems.
Were you the first person in that role in that company?
Yes.
Or did you take over from somebody?
No, I was the first person.
Wow.
Starting from scratch.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's fun though. It's good. And I've got
to
fun
grow
for the
and
right develop
person.
it over the
for
years.
the right
For the right person, it's fun.
But do you know what was the most fun was I was able to take all the years of experience I'd had before, all the ways of doing things that I'd seen that I really didn't like, all the ways of doing things that I loved, and I was able to implement that myself and just shape it how I see is the right way to do things, basically.
Can we talk for a few minutes about language technology?
Oh, yeah.
And then what you don't have to name them if you don't want to, but what the challenges are and that, particularly, if you're looking to expand and you have such a small team. And challenges and...
lots of challenges. Right. What language technologies do we use? Well, we don't currently have a translation workflow management system internally yet. I am using one on the side of my translation partner. I really see them as partners, not vendors, by the way. That's really critical to me. I have a team. I consider my French translation team and French linguist team to be an extension of my team. Same for the German linguist. That's really important that they are partners, not vendors, And so while we don't have that internally, we do use a system on the side of our translation partner. We were using one system, which I was thinking we might bring in-house. Then we were having some issues with like some strings being too long and not fitting. And they suggested that the translators would prefer to work in a different system because it would give them easier access to context and visuals. So I was like, fine, we'll swap. So we did. The button too long text issue was no longer an issue, so that's all fine. So in terms of technologies, let me see. Internally, we use Jira for project management. That's primarily just we had so many different systems, and eventually the company's like, we just need to have one for everyone in the system in the company. So it's that for now. It might change, I don't know, but that's what we're using to receive in translation requests. What other software? I also use machine translation, and we use another platform for supporting our customer support agents. Machine translation is kind of the bane of my life because I've been trying for a good year now to get machine translation to work on our content. Of course, the issue is the source content and how it's structured and formatted, not the engine.
But you're also so specialised.
Well, we are, right? And a lot of our content is marketing, which obviously is not suited to that. But I'm close. We're doing a very cool project, taking the learnings from the failures over last year. And I'm now working with our content creation team on some types of content. We're looking into using generative AI to basically create resource center articles from scratch in English on set topics, applying best practice writing for MT simple English rules. And then I'm going to test machine translating that and seeing is that suitable for post editing. We will always be using human post editing because we are an elevated brand. That's what we're about. And because I see my translation partners as partners, I'm not going to be that client who's pushing really subpar, awful quality content on them and then
expecting magic,
half the price and expecting to get beautiful content back. I'm not doing that. And I'm very happy actually that I'm in a company that supports those values as well, to be honest.
It also helps that you've spent some time in supplier land.
Yeah, well,
it might help with your perspective.
A little bit, yeah. But I mean, no, I just, we have a bunch of values. A lot of them are, build relationships, spread joy, do the right thing. This to me feels like do the right thing. The other thing I would say is I'm very aware that we are a relatively small account, right, for translation partners. However, my USP is that we're nice to work with and we really see them as a partner. So
exactly.
I ask a lot. We always pay on time. But we're nice to work with, and I like to think that the content is a little bit of a creative break from translating dry software engineering instructions or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that, we're small too, and I'm just thinking of some of our clients. So our sort of most of the clients that we work with, particularly the ones where we are scaling our own business, is on a subscription model. So it means then that we end up being the sole supplier for few organisations. And we have clients that range in size that are hiring up to 50 people a year to others that are hiring 10 a year or 6 a year or whatever. I'd be horrified if I thought that the people that are... Now, truthfully, there's a wider range of service offerings.
Yes.
If you pay more money,
you're going to get more,
However, the style of communication, the style of delivery, if you're a tiny client or a big client,
well,
we're all going out of this world at some stage.
Yeah. I would put it to you, though, Paula, that's not always the attitude of people in the industry.
I agree.
We've had people sort of
I know,
triple rates and decline to work with us because it kind of wasn't worth their time. And I'm like, well,
but the truth is,
we're not right partners for each other,
No, I agree with that.
Match.
But
that's okay.
That's
I agree. Sometimes for us, there's no match either.
Yeah,
but that doesn't mean you have to be
horrible.
horrible.
Someone said to me, "We're not a match," then treble the prices.
Oh, that's so. I see. Sorry,
that's like
I missed that step.
Just let's call a spade here.
Oh, so that's prohibitive pricing. Sorry, I missed
exactly,
that step in what you were saying.
Yeah.
Okay, that's no. I've said to people, we're not right. We're not right. So sorry, I just think that it's an awful shame. I think that isn't it funny that sometimes we live like we're going to be here forever, and sometimes we live like. We're the centre of it all.
Oh yeah,
and sometimes
I'm very well aware of my position and my size. You know.
No, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about in general. But I also do think that sometimes we live like others are not a key part of the universe too.
Absolutely.
I
try not to ever do that.
I try not to. I try not to, and on the days when I'm feeling really angry. I don't make calls because you cannot take the words back.
That's so true.
But you know, we let ourselves down more than anybody else down.
Yeah.
Sorry,
for
I
sure.
sound like I'm on my soapbox.
No,
I'll go back to the.
It's part of life. I mean, it's just no day. I mean, every day is nearly different in a way.
Yeah, for sure.
But there is one thing you mentioned about technology, which is very interesting about AI, generative AI.
Yeah.
Is that, and I fully understand the process in which you are going to integrate AI, generative AI.
Testing.
Experimenting. Sorry, testing. For the editing. But actually, when I hear that, and you're not the only one that I hear that from, my next question is, do you consider generative AI maybe to create content immediately in those languages, in French, German, and not having to translate it?
Yeah, but who's going to review and sign it off and make sure that it's correct and
okay? A language expert. I mean,
exactly, for sure. But then, from our side, it's going to cost a lot more to pay those people by the hour and just machine translate and post edit.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I'm looking at a raw cost level, which I sort of have to do, right?
And do you get the same output? Do you get the same result if you do it?
We're working on it.
Okay.
Not yet, right? But I will also say though, the other challenge that this has brought to me, it's most of our content is created or written in the United States or managed by teams who come from the US.
Oh yeah.
Generative AI is very commonly used there. It's being integrated into so many different workflows and so many different teams. The volume of content that they are now producing that is coming downstream to me has like multiplied. And I'm not getting any extra budget here, so it's how do I
didn't know that. So.
But
that makes sense.
Lots of companies are going to be having this challenge.
No, absolutely.
What you're saying is actually the
norm. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. And now you put it like that, I fully understand that, of course, creating content in multiple languages from scratch might not be the best option, but it's because, as you said, you use the word downstream, and that's because you don't control the upstream, and the upstream is where actually you start creating effectiveness by using the right data, by using the right prompt. And of course, if you are just downstream, if you are at the end of the chain, as I call it, then of course I realize that you cannot just trust AI, generative AI, certainly used in the US.
But you're always going to have to verify and validate what
exactly.
Absolutely. But then that's where the costs get prohibitive if you're as kind of small as we are. It's economies of scale, I think.
What you're saying is not restricted to conversations we've had with people. That's not restricted to small companies. Sometimes the budget allocated to the whole language management side of any business, sometimes it's quite horrifying to hear what people are expected to do with no money.
Even in big organizations today, considering implementing AI, generative AI, whatever the model is, it's a very different discussion. But I think the main roadblock for using generative AI to create content in multiple languages without translation is actually the level of quality or effectiveness
of the data.
Upstream of the data and the prompt. Because indeed... And that's why some companies, in the life science industry and other industries, they prefer now to move to small language models, which are small in size, but cheaper to build, of course, and more accurate, because there is less data, but better data.
But it's like a closed
exactly.
system.
And then when you work for, in my area, it's like, cancerology, oncology, etc.,
Oh, you don't want to make a mistake there.
Yeah, well, you don't want to make a mistake unless you want to kill somebody in your neighborhood. But
that was a funny example that somebody said to us yesterday. The leaflet was supposed to say, "Take one tablet before you sleep at night," but in fact, it was translated to "Take one tablet before you die."
Oh my God! Okay. That's a terrible mistake.
That's I have plenty of examples like that in life science. But that's the roadblock where you see people. Oh yeah, I would like to trust generative AI more than I do today.
Of course,
but I don't control the data and the prompts, and that's why
we even find that with English.
True.
A lot of the English content isn't quite there or correct.
There is, and I would hope that Gala or the conferences would tackle that issue and say, you in the localization industry or community, you have an expertise called language expertise.
Yes.
So bring that expertise upstream to actually control and have better data, better prompts, and then you will have better output at the end.
Well, that's exactly in a nutshell, and I'm gonna. I have to watch this back and make a note of that. That's exactly the project I'm sort of working on right now with the content creation teams.
Exactly.
Is exactly that. To change the prompts that they're using to create product copy, to create like more technical type articles, and if we can crack that nut and get them to be more disciplined in how they're creating content, we'll be able to streamline and be much more efficient in the multilingual sphere.
And at the end of the day, I mean, I know it's a topic that is a little bit avoided sometimes in the localization industry. So on the supplier side, is the effectiveness. I don't use the word quality, I use effectiveness. The effectiveness of language data. So essentially, what is this language data? Is it, first of all, of course, in many organizations, it is created from files that are existing, PowerPoint or audio video files. Sometimes this language data is acquired from another source, from a social media network, whatever. But anyway, however it's created or acquired, if you are considering spending time and some money, of course, on the language data quality or effectiveness, then of course the rest of the chain or the rest of the workflow, let's say, is going to get better. But of course, it's not natural to do that because people are so focused on the output. So I want to generate content.
But also, there's not specific to this industry or this part of any process. People are very territorial.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, seriously.
I know.
And you mentioned silos. So is it really silos or well-defined silos? Or?
No, not really. I mean,
it sounds like it isn't. Your part of the business that you're in is evolving and having because it's a new role.
Not that. No, it's not that new. I'm in the role now nearly 8 years.
I know, but that's actually how long has the company been trading?
17, 18 years.
Yeah, so it's still newish. It's evolving how everybody are playing together and how it all fits.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
In a way, you're very fortunate in that you're possibly in it. You're there at a time where you can help influence where this function sits in the company.
Yeah.
So it's probably, I don't know, I don't work in your company, but the idea of it being identified right now as siloed is probably a temporary thing. It could be a temporary thing.
Yeah, not really siloed, but just, there's the marketing team, there's the SEO team, there's the product team, there's the merchandising team. They all have their own areas of responsibility, which are fairly big.
Makes sense.
And I think just from my perspective, like sometimes it does seem that they are all siloed because they don't all talk to each other sometimes enough. But my team and I talk to all of the different stakeholders across all the different teams.
Do you think? Yeah, it's actually that's the story of any business that's trying to scale and grow, and you're trying to find a way to make sure to. Yeah, it is. And I don't know that they ever go away. Because then you go to a certain size, and then you're going into mergers and acquisitions, and then you're acquiring teams, and you're acquiring product, and you're acquiring a brand, and you're trying to make sure people play nicely together and that they're properly effective together. And then how long do you give before you decide that that part's not working? I am telling you, in the previous life, the discussions I sat in on, and you're there going, hard work.
Yeah.
Actually, just as a segue now into, I suppose, what do you see now for the next 6 to 12 months? So where you've mentioned a few times about some of the projects, but if you're sort of where would you at the end of those projects rather than going through the machinations of them?
Yeah.
So what would you like to be sitting here in 12 months' time and say, this is where we are now, or this is what we're doing now, or this is the markets we're in now, or
that's a really interesting, juicy, big question, right? So I would love that we have successful rebranding of some form or other of the function.
Great.
That's just like my own little pet project. In terms of my function, sort of business-wise, I really want to see us having expanded into our new geographies.
Great.
We're going into Italy and Spain.
Yeah.
Want to have created a great customer experience for those customers in those languages. I also am very keen to see the function internally elevated and working at a sort of higher, more efficient level. Because things that the ways of working today with just 2 foreign languages versus with 4, that will change. It needs to change. Maybe we'll have better integrated content management systems. Maybe we'll have a translation workflow system in-house instead of on the side of our partners. I would like to think that in another 12 months' time, my role will be quite different, in terms of how I'll be managing the function and the work that we will be doing. I see us, having more partners, more external partners working with us.
Okay.
Potentially, I'd love to do something like, a day for all the translators. We did that a couple of years ago where we shipped lots of product to their offices, we got them all in. Everyone got to get hands up close and personal with our products, and do some really nice brand training and really, have a big team, not necessarily internal, but build the team that really loves the brand and believes in us to work with us for the longer term. That's kind of
interesting.
You also mentioned, I can't remember whether it was before we started recording or not, about going back into the office and bringing teams back into the office.
Yes.
How are you finding that, or how is your team finding it, or how is the organisation?
That's a very new thing. We've just done it this week, right? So
but there's going to be people looking at this or listening to this thinking, how do I get my team back in? Or what's the benefit?
You basically have to make them. Nobody is going to want to do it.
But what are the advantages when they get there?
Good answer.
but you do. We tried it softly, and that didn't.
Yeah, it doesn't work
so well. Even myself, none of us wanted to really go in.
Yeah.
But it was a very clear company-wide decision across all of our locations.
Yeah.
Worldwide, we're all going in Monday through to Wednesday. That's it. If this doesn't work for you, we respectfully bid you adieu, kind of thing. It's up to you, your choice.
Yeah.
And so,
what are the advantages of it? What do you find?
So, first of all, you need to have a nice office space. That would be my top tip.
Yeah.
Have a nice space that people, when they finally get out of bed and out of their pajamas
we had this conversation about 2 hours ago.
Yeah, but you really need to have a nice space. And we now have a gorgeous space. It's beautiful. Lovely view of a park and lovely high ceilings. We have lots of our products around. We have nice standy city desks. We have everything. So that's number one, make it a nice office space.
Cool.
And then the other thing is, I think, and what are the advantages? You need to have sort of different types of spaces than we would have had previously.
Okay, that's interesting.
Because the whole point of being in person together with people is that you can have these kind of organic conversations, sort of brainstormy, noodling on ideas. So you want to have sofas and armchairs, different types of spaces where people can go and have those conversations, have those kind of sort of brainstorming in a informal kind of way, So we have a few different spaces around our office space that are pretty much for that. And we're only back in 3 days this week, just past. But what I can already say is that having those space and that sort of nice environment has led itself to those kind of organic conversations and better cross-functional collaboration and being able to learn from different your colleagues that may be for example, the operations team who are in charge of shipping and delivery and warehouses, they're now in the office as well as us. And even just hearing their conversations and the stuff that they're working on, it's very informative for me, you know.
Yeah, that's fair.
So that's the positives. The negatives is that if I need to get something done, really, I have to put on noise cancelling headphones and just tune out from everything, all the buzz that's all around. But I think that's something we'll all be getting used to.
How would you recommend, from a company's perspective, to look after people's personal development, ambitions and retention?
I think it's really important that people have agency in how they work, and that they feel valued and that they feel heard, and that, you know, the work that they are doing feels meaningful.
Yeah.
And I think it's up to each manager of any employee to help guide that vision and support that. In Balsam, we have a few very sort of special and unique aspects to the people management that I haven't come up against anywhere else. Yeah, basically we have once a year, it's optional. You can have what we call a fulfillment chat.
Oh.
Right, where that is basically delving into, and it's part of this evergreen people first culture. It's delving into, you know, what makes you tick as an employee or working, right? What puts you into flow? What do you love doing? What puts you into an anxiety state? What do you hate doing? How does this tally with your day-to-day work? And then we also bring in personal aspects to that. You know, if you're planning to buy a house this year, as your manager, I'd love to know that. How can I support you with that? Is there letters I can write? You know, whatever I can do, I will do to help you there.
Must be quite difficult though to create. I'm trying to imagine what it's like to create an environment where your team members are comfortable to come and tell you what they're anxious about.
But that's what I'm telling you.
I'd like to think I do it. But
it's a very unique company. We don't have the sort of cutthroat corporate that you're might
safe.
Have if you're... no, nobody's... Well, safe. I don't know. You need to, of course, perform. But it really is like a people first, family first. I feel very supported. My manager's actually super. He's very supportive, like of everything or anything, which is great.
That's... Wow, it's... I don't hear that very often, to be honest with you.
There you go.
It's more like the corporate world is seen as something very hard, very aggressive, where people have to fight for survival to keep their job because, you know, it's me or my colleague who has to be let go, etc. So you know what I mean. So it's very not just in the US as many people think, but also in Europe. You have this trend of being, you know, a hard manager and say you need to stretch your team as much as possible.
Yeah, we do stretch.
Yeah, of course, I imagine.
And we have performance reviews, of course, as well. Standard stuff that, you know, with your 1 to 5 grading or whatever it is. But that's part of it. We all have to perform.
Absolutely.
There's definitely performance management. We have to. Because if we don't perform, the business won't be profitable. And then we'll go out of business.
Yeah, nobody has a
and
job.
That doesn't help us either.
No.
But you don't have to do it in a mean and cutthroat way. That's why it's sort of led with talking about these evergreen companies and the Tugboat Institute, because it's a whole other approach.
Oh, yeah.
It's a whole other way of working. But we still have to be profitable.
Yeah.
You know, and we adopt lots of technologies and it's the business. But we can take a longer term view and be more sort of choiceful and mindful about, you know.
The thing that I would like to have a podcast discussion about, and I remember having a conversation with, funnily enough, Luis Miguel from Avantpage about 2 years ago, was how do we grow profitability without it costing integrity? I don't understand. Now, I see it day after day after day where we are sacrificing profitability. We're sacrificing sales. You know, because... But there has to be a way. Why aren't we educating our younger people that it can be profitable? That doesn't mean you take business from people that are never going to pay you or people that are complete idiots. You don't have to do that. So it's a huge interest to me because, funnily enough, that's... I remember having this conversation. So the discussion then about it being, you know, that being something that was run out of gala.
Yeah,
it's just...
But it's exactly that. And like I've had positions in the past where I've had to do things that I felt were morally not great. Like, for example, pushing out poor empty content to providers and forcing them to deliver, you know. That's why I sort of love where I am now. Because yes, I do push on price. I do negotiate I'm not going to be sort of taken for a ride.
Yeah.
But I want to do the right thing. It's one of our company values. You know, I want to share joy and I want to build relationships.
But isn't it a pity that it probably takes you longer? It takes your day longer. No, it's just that sometimes in order to get to the discussion with the individual that works your way, you've gone through 2 or 3 people that don't. Whereas, that's the point I meant.
Yeah.
That's all.
No,
I don't want to sound like St. Paula because I am not St. Paula. I need a profitable business. I love a profitable business.
Us too, though. We're absolutely not a charity.
Yeah,
you know?
I just don't understand, and maybe that's what comes with the, with the approaching old age.
You can do the right thing.
I actually won't. I don't know. I actually don't know the answer to whether it's possible. I remember I had this lady who worked for me years ago. She was an exceptionally lovely woman, exceptionally talented, and at the time, she and I ended up in this very deep discussion. She was a good bit younger than I was then, and obviously still now, Sorry, she walked away from the discussion believing that you can still shed loads of money and only work with integrity and only live with integrity. And I remember saying to her, it's my goal, but I haven't seen it play out. So I still haven't seen it play out.
Well, you should look at Balsam Brands. We have a lot of integrity.
No, I get that. But some people might say, so, do you know something? If you were more ruthless, you'd have 1,000 employees. You'd be selling more than Christmas trees. And you'd be but I'm not saying you should.
No,
but
that's not our goal. That's what differentiates us.
I get that. I get that. It's just that I honestly don't know that I've seen it. I'm probably speaking more from my previous career, which I haven't been in for a long time now, where I was exposed to many, and that's part and parcel of the role of anybody who works in firms of accountants. You're exposed to hundreds and hundreds of different businesses and hundreds of different business models.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, some of the stuff. I remember sitting. No, I won't go there. That's it. The number of times that I sat there and thought, how do these people sleep at night?
Yes, I know what you're saying.
Too many times. But the people that I saw it with were phenomenally profitable. Now, maybe they didn't have that chip in their brain. And maybe it's a gender-specific thing. I don't know. Anyway, there we go.
It depends on the environment, I think, as well. But I think you mentioned something very interesting, is that you have this option of taking the pulse of people in this fulfillment chat. I love those words. I mean, fulfillment chat. I will keep that in mind.
Yes, it's really nice.
Yes, very nice. It's fulfillment chat. I've never heard that before. But okay, I assume it's like taking the pulse of someone.
Yes,
and
it's not about your performance. It's about what you love doing, what you love about the job, what projects in future would you be interested in participating in, and so on. And then as a manager, it sort of helps me have on my radar what my report likes, and you might like to work in this project, or that kind of thing.
Talking about international expansion, you mentioned, of course, European expansion, Italy, etc.
Yes.
What about Asia? Because Asia is now sort of target for many companies, because the economy in Europe is not so great. And of course, now the sort of the gold rush goes to Asia, specifically Southeast Asia. Markets like Thailand, Vietnam, etc., Indonesia. So, do you have plans not just for offshoring, because you mentioned that you have a team in Philippines, but just to delight customers in those countries? Like, let's take China as an example, because it's such a big market.
Absolutely. I don't know. That's above my pay grade.
Good answer.
I don't think so, but I don't know.
Yeah, because there are so many companies now being nearly obsessed in a positive way by Asia, because Asia is growing.
I know, but is Christmas that big there?
Well, in some countries,
I know Japan,
not
maybe,
yes. Japan. Well, not in China, of course. That's a good example. But
I think we are. I do know that there is. There is some thought about that in the future, but we've got a few other closer to home markets to get into first.
To conquer.
There's more low-hanging fruit, perhaps in Europe.
Yeah, I know. I was just curious to know, because now the economies in Europe is so nearly flat. And when you have like 5% in Asia of growth, for them it's the end of the world, because they say only 5%. If we had 5% of growth in Europe, we would be so happy, because
we've had a lot more growth than that, actually.
Oh,
yeah, but it's a different industry.
It's in terms of international, it's not just geopolitical, because there is of course the question of the US now. Yes, if you look at the map of the world, then of course, in Europe there are so many discussions about going to, of course, international markets, and of course there is this first target, which is Asia, because there is such a potential.
Or for us, for us, Latin America.
Latin America, why not Latin?
Christian countries,
Latin
have spending power that celebrate Christmas.
I mean, Argentina, Chile,
Brazil.
That's.
Do they have big? Well, some of those countries do have big spending power as well.
Oh yeah,
some of them. Also
Brazil.
We were sort of targeting the upper end of any market. There's always some people who have
Brazil.
money.
That's true. Brazil is an interesting country. It's big. Of course, there is still much poverty, but you have very rich people in Brazil. So that's probably my question should have been for Latam more than for Asia.
That's something else that's interesting about our business, because it's not software, right? You can't just turn on a download to somewhere. You have to have electrical requirements filled, the right type of plug, the right type of adapters. You need to have waste to comply with like regulations in Europe and all these kind of things. And also the products are very, very physically big. So again, you need to have the proper shipping network and all of that as well. So it's not just as easy as it would be to expand for, say, a software product or a very small physical product
service offering
that doesn't have a plug on it, or lights, right? Because a lot of our trees, most of our trees, come pre-lit. So the lights are already strung on them, and that's a fantastic benefit, but it's a little bit of it's more complicated to get into markets. The other thing I'll say that's really interesting and sort of challenging is if you make any mistake in anything that's in a box, on a box, that's really interesting, right? Because you can't just
what type of mistake might happen?
Launch a
so
patch.
So you have the wrong plug, for example.
You cannot...
No, if you have to open here and it should actually be open there, or,
You cannot fix it on the fly.
You cannot. And not only that, you're going to incur a cost.
Very true.
In the warehouse for a human to stick a sticker over it, etc., etc.
I got that several times.
Or your products might get taken off the shelf.
I got that several times when I was buying some products. There was a sticker. And I realized
that's what it was.
That's not just for fun reasons. It's probably for good reasons.
And there's a big cost associated with
imagine.
that. So thank God I've never made that error. But
imagine the attention to detail you'd have to have.
Oh yeah,
that's what I'm saying. But I kind of get a buzz from that.
Oh, I know.
I mean,
but another thing we have. Sorry to
interrupt
you, Bruno. We have
ahead.
this, like in Balsam. You gotta look at balsamhill.com or .co.uk. Our trees are amazing. So much so that we sell by species type. Right, you can get a Nordmann, you can get a Norway spruce, you can get a Vermont white spruce, all the different Scotch pine. You can shop by species basically, and you can get like what we call a branch sample kit. Which is a box, has different branches of the different types of trees, the different species, for customers to have a look at one in their own home and go, right, actually, I really like the branch on this Nordmann fir. I'm going to buy a Nordmann. And then they go onto the website. There's I think 10 branches in the box or 7. They all have a hang tag on them. So that hang tag is in English, French and German. It says the name of the tree. That name of the tree needs to be the same as what's on the website, so that when the customer goes, I like this tree, it must be the same as is on there. It also must absolutely be the correct translation on the correct one, right?
That's true.
I'm trying to picture the people that when you hire, when you're, when you're expanding even more. Oh my goodness! How do you test for their person's attention because you don't want it to be a costly exercise where
It's
you...
quite...
I'm just picturing it myself.
No, do you know what? The amount of resumes that I got through that had typos on them.
Oh, please. I know.
Seriously.
No, I know.
Lack of attention to detail right there, you know.
Or the best one we get sometimes is completely fluent in English, and the thing is written in half Spanish and half German. You're looking, oh my God, this is an English speaking.
I had a person completely fluent in German, and in the interview I started speaking German. Sorry,
school German.
I didn't know you were going to speak German to me. I'm like, well, you said you're fluent, you know.
Oh, that was a rookie.
Certainly in this industry, anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
No, it's
that's a rookie mistake now for that person. That was a silly thing to do.
It's very true that you are in a business where one mistake at some point in the chain
has a big cost
has
impact.
a ripple effect.
Yes, big time.
Yeah, that's
I have another example.
Oh yeah, I love those examples. It's so important.
After I started, we sort of did like a quality check or like a temperature check on all of the localized product names. And there was one tree, I can't remember which one it was specifically, but the English, it was like a pine, like Scotch pine or something in English. And the translation for German, unfortunately, was translated as spruce.
Okay.
I was like, we got to fix this. So after the season, luckily it wasn't in the branch sample kit, so I was just change it on the website. Yeah. However, the following year, a customer rang. I swearing up, down and blind that they bought this particular pine tree. Of course, now it's called a spruce tree on the website. And the confusion in customer support, but we don't have this tree. I have it here. It's like, oh my God. The translation was incorrect. We fixed it, but the customer still had the outdated translation in their head. And it came to me through from customer support.
That is, well, these examples you just mentioned are, in my opinion, very tangible examples of language value.
Yes.
Because as you said, one word has a ripple effect that you don't control and that you cannot stop over time.
Yeah, a year later.
And I think, of course, when it's digital, you can fix it on the digital platform. But when it's physical, it's there, it's on the market, and
it might be sitting in a warehouse for 6 months, a year.
Right. And that's why there were some cases as well in the pharmaceutical industry when there were mistakes in the notices.
Yes.
Where, the numbers, for instance, take 10 millimeter or instead of 1 millimeter.
Or we have measurements on our site too, the same.
It is. And then there were still medication boxes, drugs that were in the warehouses that had the mistake.
Yeah.
Even 2 years after. So
that's
why I love the digital world,
because
you can fix things so quickly. In the physical world, you have really to run after what you did wrong.
You need to be very sure. Double, triple, quadruple check.
It is, and well, for you, I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, but for you and your colleague, it's the best way to justify if you need to justify your role.
Yeah, well, we get it right 100 times. Nobody notices.
I agree. I know what
time
you're
you
about
make
to
a mistake.
I don't.
What are you doing? Localization. Oh my God, you broke it. It's like, no, we got it right so many times.
It makes headlines.
That's it.
But that's human nature.
Yeah.
Humans are complaining when something goes wrong, and when something is right,
they don't even notice.
But at least for you, if you have those cases, if you are, if you face those issues, you can say, "Hey, look, I didn't lie to you."
I have another nice example actually, where about the importance of context or visuals when you're translating things, right? So we sell as well as Christmas trees. We also do like ornaments and baubles and sets of those. And there was one set of ornaments which had like spherical ones, oval sort of egg-shaped ones, and then what we called finial shaped, right? It was kind of like this sort of like a teardrop type ornament.
Yeah.
But one customer rang customer support saying, "I'm missing my tree topper. The description here on your website says there should be a tree topper in this kit," and we checked it. What happened was the translators didn't have a visual of the ornament set, and so they translated finial. It should have said finial shaped, But a finial actually is an endpoint on something. And so they knew that we were also selling tree toppers, and they translated it as that way. And people were like, oh, the translators, it's all wrong. I'm like, no, they actually didn't have the context. But luckily that was only on the website, and we were able to correct that fairly quickly. But now it just goes to show, especially for things like products, you always have to have a visual to share with the linguist.
I think that there's nothing worse for a language expert than having to work on a piece of content without knowing the context.
Of course.
Because
how can you get that right?
Yeah, whether it's visual, it might be audio, it might be thus sometimes even textual, because you have two sentences and you don't know what's before and what's after. Yeah. And I think that this is really where, again, in terms of value, you mentioned value.
But that's a good example to share internally as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. But
absolutely.
sometimes, that's a lesson I learned when I was working in the IT industry. One of my managers told me, Bruno, don't get excited, don't get stressed about something, just go to, he was calling that the disaster recovery. And actually, what he meant is that you have to go through a disaster to recover and make sure that people understand what...
That's for sure.
So disaster recovery, it means that sometimes you need a disaster.
You do.
I know that.
Sometimes you need to let it happen.
Because otherwise you might be sick
Yeah.
of explaining and telling people they don't listen to you.
Yeah.
And let it go.
Yeah.
Let the issue happen, and you recover it, you fix it, and then people understand.
Make a crisis, fix a crisis. Eh?
Yeah, exactly. they need to feel the pain.
Yeah,
sometimes
for sure.
That's human, probably.
Yeah.
It's the danger of being seamless.
Yeah.
So when you're offering a seamless, and it's normally seamless, people. That's actually, unfortunately, can end up being a little dangerous, because then when one thing backfires, as I said, you make the headlines.
Yeah.
When you become invisible and people stop listening, maybe the standard starts to drop. Yeah. And then also when you're very good at what you do, sometimes your suppliers come to shout like fury at you when you get one thing wrong. The danger of being seamless.
Yeah, it's very true.
So
we all want to be seamless.
Issues are good for you and your colleague.
Definitely.
Because at least you can say, hey, I didn't lie to you. Believe, trust Emma. Trust Emma for, multilingual and international content. But, I think it's human nature at the end of the day. And even more if you work, I love American people, but they have this sort of single cultural and linguistic
very much
view.
So, yes.
And of course, sometimes it's difficult for them to understand. And I can walk in their shoes and say, maybe if I were American myself, I wouldn't quite understand why Europeans are so complicated in terms of number of languages. Because in my country, we speak, and now it's official now, we speak only English. So but you see that's your how should I say, not the added value, but that's your asset, because you work in an American company, US, and you are able to tell them that. Hopefully they listen to you.
Yes, mostly.
Mostly, okay. Well,
like every job.
Like every job.
Yeah, of course, the world is not perfect, but I think those examples are quite interesting. And certainly, because you are operating still in the very physical.
That's it. It's so difficult. I worked in software localization for years. This is so different. You
don't feel like working in a more digital world, or.
It's a real buzz, though. It's exciting.
It's exciting, but it's
at the
same time you are
physical
depending
products into people's homes.
You're depending on all the challenges in the physical world.
That's the fun part. That's the fun part.
Oh, sorry, I forgot the fun. So sorry.
But apart from that, it's where you are in your own career within an organisation where you're establishing the standards.
That's it, yeah.
I think
that's the fun part. I love that.
It's a great opportunity as long as you're able to do it. And you're obviously well able to do it.
Yeah.
No, I love it. Stress is not killing you, so...
No, it's fine. I've basically seen it all before.
I know that.
As I keep telling my colleague, it's Christmas treats. As you said earlier, we're not curing cancer or any, we're spreading joy. Yeah. It's okay.
Let's do our very best every day.
Yeah, that's it.
And you can really, indeed, as you said, Paula, you can be really the person of reference in the organization for all these so-called issues or challenges. It reminds me of these open spaces where you have, many nationalities and there is a flag. And then you might have the flag here, localization. That's Emma's flag.
I have the European Union flag. I think that must be my flag.
Absolutely. No, but it's good and it's challenging at the same time to be the person the go-to person.
Yeah.
And I think that, but at the same time, for you, it's a great sort of playground.
It is. That's a great description, Bruno. It is like a language playground, and I get to work on so many different like pieces of content and types of content. Like, for example, recording or localizing TV spots. Whole other ballgame. Like, I got asked once, and this is a real stretch. Can you localize the wardrobe for this, ad? Huh? What? What kind of clothes would people wear in the UK versus the US? I was like, wow.
But have you ever watched the IKEA ads?
Oh, they're next level.
Yeah.
They're definitely localizing.
Yeah.
But everything, the
but
clothing,
They do it a whole other way, and they're massive.
Yeah. No, I know. I know.
The giant of the retail industry.
Yeah.
That's fascinating to see.
But even things like how to get past the broadcasting approving
authorities.
That's one. It's challenging. Also, I also learned like any change to a TV spot costs a fortune to make. So again, you need to get that right first time.
Yeah. Well,
true.
you mentioned ads, commercials.
Yes. Yes.
I have to ask you: is it easy for you to work with those creative agencies, big or small agencies, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people say, oh yeah, I trust my, my agency to deliver content in multiple languages because the other culture. But is it true for you, or is it just that you have to be after them all the time?
So the marketing team, we do work with agencies to do a lot of these things, but I have built up a great relationship with the marketing managers. And so they always lock in for the key sort of decision-making points, like sourcing the voice talent, right? Checking the accent. Is this the right accent? I remember one time, and this was another great chance where we got to sort of prove our value in a way. They had sourced a French, they'd whittled it down to like 3 voice actors that they loved for French. The one that they preferred the most, I listened, I was like, yeah, sounds good to me. But I asked my in-country linguist, they're like, no, that's French-Canadian. It's not going to work for France.
Okay.
So it's like, guys, so this is really important.
Detail.
Detail. And when we're recording with the agencies, the voiceovers for the TV spot, me and my linguist will sit in on the recording and sort of give like linguistic direction, right? Sort of the accent or the intonation, but you need your language specialist to do that, or your language expert, right? So we work hand in hand collaboratively with them.
Thank you, Emma, very much for coming in to talk to us today. It was actually hugely interesting, highly relatable, and it's wonderful to speak with somebody. Bruno has just actually used a phrase. What was that phrase? Digital. You're at the crossroads between
digital and physical.
Digital and physical. So hugely interesting. And I do believe that a number of your stories and experiences are going to be highly relatable to people that are watching. Yep. And obviously the story of the organisation that you work for. An awful lot of people, I suspect, will be interested in the philosophy and hopefully go and do a bit of research on that. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure this morning, people.
That's great.
Thank you for your time.